2 years ago, Americans watched in horror as a crisis unfolded at the Kabul airport.
There's desperation and anguish.
More than 80,000 Afghans have since arrived in America, but this story is still unfolding. I'm Andrea Martin. In my new podcast, Stranger Becomes Neighbor, we'll find out what happens to these new arrivals in our communities. Who would help our newest neighbors? Follow us at kslpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen.
Hey, welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, a podcast about recovery. I'm Casey Scott, and if you know somebody who needs some help, have them do what I did and give Pinnacle Recovery Center a call to help you out on your road to recovery. We got Dr. Matt here. How are you, man?
I'm good. How are you doing?
So let's get this right. The only thing you got in the divorce was the crock pot?
No, I got that in the old waffle maker.
Ooh.
Ironically,
yeah,
it makes heart-shaped waffles.
So here's what I got. I got a crock pot and the old waffle maker, but guess what the waffle maker can also do?
What?
Make grilled cheese sandwiches.
Oh, yeah.
But they're in the shape of a waffle, and I just tell my kids, they're cool.
So is it just a waffle maker?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
But you can also put a quesadilla in there and some cheese.
You could put anything in there, I guess.
Really? Yeah. I mean, It's really like a George Foreman grill with bumps.
All right. I'm coming over. I want to see what we can make.
Yeah. I'm in.
Okay.
Guess what we'll have for a treat?
What's that? Oh, no, you brought your
Swedish
addiction.
fish.
You brought your addiction.
Yeah, that's my
there we
newest
go.
addiction right there.
Yeah.
And they don't sell them in small bags, just these big bags. Have you had a Swedish fish lately?
No, let's do it. I haven't had one in a long time. I do remember. Oh, these are the big kind.
Oh, yeah.
When I was a kid, I thought
we
they were
for
smaller.
KSL. Yeah.
We go bigger, we go
That's
home.
right. Here.
All right. We're passing them around the studio right now.
Take a Swedish fish.
Oh, that's fresh.
Right?
Right. Juicy.
And imagine some Diet Mountain Dew with the cherry flavor in there going down.
Yeah. Okay. Where is that? Why didn't you get that?
At the Maverick.
Okay.
All right. Hey, I'm going to give some to Josh real quick.
Josh, sugar up, buddy.
All right. So I did something cool last night.
Yeah?
I had a homecoming of sort. Well, I've
Okay.
got two homecoming stories.
Okay.
Well, the first homecoming is it's Davis High's homecoming this week. And my daughter's in ninth grade. So
Okay.
not technically at Davis High, but she's
a freshman, high school freshman, right?
And so I said, do you get to go to the homecoming dance? And she goes, no, Dad. Mom says I can't because I'm not 16. I said, light bulb. What if I go with you? She goes, why would I do that? And I go, I think it would be fun. I mean, you could organize a dance, go there and hang out, and I can drive, and it'd be kind of cool. And she goes, no.
Really?
Well, she actually said no.
Okay.
Really loud.
Okay.
So,
She
but I
was
thought that-
firm about it.
Yeah. And the other homecoming I had was...
But I think that's a cool thing for you to offer as a dad.
I thought it would be
and
cool.
She may not have taken you up on it, but you should always remember that
Yeah.
my dad was willing to embarrass me in front of all my friends.
It'd
That's
be
awesome.
my homecoming date.
Yeah.
I said I'd get you a boutonniere. We'd match colors. It would be all kinds of fun.
Should have called me. I would have been all in.
Want to go to homecoming?
Yeah.
So last night I did a homecoming because I went back to Pinnacle Recovery Center.
Oh, different kind of homecoming.
And they had kind of an alumni barbecue, and they said, hey, would you come and DJ? And I was like, yeah.
Right.
And so I went and played some tunes, and the whole time I'm down there, I was like, is this song a trigger song? Is this song a trigger song? Don't play this song.
Didn't play White Lines?
I didn't play White Lines, although
Okay.
I thought to. And the therapist there said, actually, this would be a good place to do it because we could work through it being a trigger.
There you go.
And I was like, huh.
Oh, therapist.
Because
come
remember
on.
the two important things I learned when I was in recovery.
Yeah, what were well, you
My
tell
ex-wife was getting married.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
And my 14-year-old daughter had her first kiss.
Yeah.
And that was a safe place to learn those.
Yeah, because you could act out and there'd be someone to support you.
Yeah, and talk to a therapist about it.
Yeah, there
which
you
I
go.
talked to a therapist about both of them.
I hope you did.
But what got me thinking is that, a year ago, I was in Pinnacle Recovery Center as a client.
Yep.
And so I feel like this last year is kind of like an 80s montage. Of all these things that have happened, that when I was in Pinnacle, a year away seemed impossible. I had no idea what a year could bring.
Mm-hmm.
But within that year, so many great things have happened. I could just picture an 80s montage in that song. You're the best around. Never gonna
You're working out.
Yeah,
you're running.
I'm losing
up the
weight.
steps.
I'm doing a podcast.
Yeah.
Good relationship with my girlfriend.
There'd be like a picture of you saying no to beer.
Yeah, it's
Right.
like no.
Yeah.
In freeze frame.
Exactly.
So I think that's what I want to talk about a little bit on this podcast is, though, a lot of the time when you're in the deeps of addiction, you think a year is forever away and what could really change in a year. But if you set your mind to it and you start with one foot in front of the other, in a year you can really travel a long ways.
Yep.
And a lot of cool things can happen. So I hope people can kind of get that from this conversation that, it does. Just one foot in front of the other will get you there.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is people think about the big picture and the long term, and it seems so insurmountable and hard to do. And places like Pinnacle Recovery help a person kind of just do that in the moment, one step at a time. And those days add up, right?
Yeah.
And 365 days later, you're a totally different person.
Well, they tell you that in AA, and when people leave, they say most people just ask for another 24. Mm-hmm. Because that's something that they can see.
Can wrap your mind around
and
it.
It's easy, and okay, just another 24. And before you know it, you got 365.
Yep.
And it's pretty cool. And once again, it goes back to kind of those corny cliches you hear our whole life is, how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
And that's the only way to get through it.
And that's good advice, though.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean,
for
I think,
all of us in lots of ways.
Yeah, and that's what we want to do with this podcast is share stories and victories. And I've got an interesting story, and I think they're going to be our guest next week.
Okay.
So stick around.
Well, I'll be back.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You have to. But we've got an interesting guest today. His name is Evan Dunn. How are you, Evan?
I'm doing well. How are you, Casey?
And Evan, you're with USARA.
That's correct.
Now, Matt got quizzed a couple episodes back. What does USARA stand for? What did you say it stood for?
You certainly are really awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, that is really close.
Is that close?
That's close, yeah. So it's the Utah Support Advocates for Recovery Awareness.
Certainly spelled with a C. I really blew that.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't even know. I was like, sounds good to me.
You bought it.
Yeah. So what is USARA?
So we're what's called a recovery community organization. So we help people transition into community supports after an acute phase of treatment. So a lot of times people go to like a residential treatment facility like you described for a substance use disorder. And then after they're done, they're looking for what the next step is. How are they going to maintain their recovery in the long term?
Because I think a lot of times when people get out of their situation or their rehabilitation center, they've got the knowledge, they've got everything they need to know, but then all of a sudden they're into the real world and they don't know where to go or what resources out there. And that's what you guys are.
Right. And we help with resource navigation. We have a team of peer recovery coaches. So everyone on our staff are people in long-term recovery. So we all get it. We've been there. We know what it's like to have walked this path. And we've all found our own path of recovery. And at USARA, it's really important for us as an organization that we recognize that there are many paths to recovery. That, for decades in this country, 12-step was the only game in town.
Yeah.
But that's no longer true. There are a variety of recovery meetings that are available to people, and people can really find a pathway of recovery that has meaning and purpose for them in their lives.
Now, one of the powerful things about this podcast that people have told me about is the sharing. And I think a lot of times when people get into recovery, there's a reason why. Why did you get into recovery?
Well, so I mean, my story starts, as a kid. I grew up in a home where my dad died from suicide at a very young age for me.
Wow.
And subsequently, my mom developed alcohol addiction, and so I had a pretty tumultuous childhood. And I was dead set that I was never going to be like that. That I was
because you often hear that,
right? Yeah, I'm not. I didn't want to turn into this, person that my mom had become when she was drinking, and eventually my mom died as a result of her substance use disorder when I was 27.
Wow.
And so by the time I was 27, both of my parents were gone from mental health and substance use conditions. Yeah. And I was determined to not let that be my story. I had, at that point, developed my own substance use disorder. I, had started drinking and using cocaine, and that had gotten me into some legal problems. But really, I mean, I just wanted a different outcome. Because I wanted to break that cycle of, what we call intergenerational addiction, right? Where we see, generation after generation following the same patterns of substance use.
Because that's, for a lot of people, that's their normal.
Right.
They don't know anything else.
Right. But I can be the generation that stops that in my family. And what's been really great is that I have a younger brother, and in the time that I've been active as a person in recovery, he's entered recovery too, and that's something that I thought I would never see.
Do you guys talk about that together and share that?
We do. Yeah, and it's it's really important. And so
I have a quick question. So you had mentioned just to help maybe the listeners understand. So you grew up in as you say, a tumultuous and kind of tragic situations in your family. Yeah. You saw your mom turn to alcohol as a coping mechanism, and I think. Right. When we talk about intergenerational issues, mental health, substance abuse, we learn our coping skills from our family. Some people, true, may have a predisposition to addiction in certain ways, but a lot of it is subtly learned in our families. And so you saw that, but you had the reaction, you had the insight at some point to say, I don't want that. Right. But you eventually started drinking. Can you talk a little bit about how old you were and maybe what conditions? Like, even though you had that insight, and a lot of people don't. A lot of people just follow that model. You had an insight that could have protected you, but at some point you shifted. Yeah. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, let me talk about that a little bit. So, I in my late teens, I was experiencing some symptoms of PTSD from having been in what was a abusive home.
Can we ask how old you were when your father committed suicide?
I was 11.
11.
Yeah. And so from then on, I was my brother and I were in and out of my mother's custody. When she was drinking, she was violent and neglectful. And
was the state involved, or did you go with
the
family?
State? Yeah, the state was involved. So, but luckily we were placed with family. So,
good.
But I mean, I did experience a number of what we call adverse childhood experiences, right? So,
that's putting it mildly,
right? Yeah. And so, but what we know is that people who experience a high number of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, have a higher predisposition to developing a substance use disorder themselves. I didn't know that at the time. I wish that I had some more education around that.
Say that one more time.
So people that have more adverse childhood experiences have a higher, like trauma, have a higher predisposition to developing a substance use disorder later on in life.
You're listening to Project Recovery. More with Evan and USARA in a second.
I'm Dave Cawley, investigative journalist and host of the podcast Cold. In October of 1985, a woman named Cherie Warren left work at a busy Salt Lake City office
to meet her estranged husband at a downtown auto dealership.
She never made it home. Cherie's car surfaced weeks later in Las Vegas.
In the parking lot of a hotel casino.
No one knows how it got there.
Strange. It was strange.
Both Cherie's estranged husband and her boyfriend raised suspicion for investigators.
I kind of thought that he might have done something.
But no arrests were ever made. In Cold Season 3, we dig into double lives, make new connections in the case, and examine the difficulty raised by reasonable doubt.
We want answers just as much as anyone else.
They have creeps like that now too, so nothing's changed.
That's the new Cold Season 3, The Search for Cherie, now available anywhere you get your podcasts.
So, and to your understanding, why is that?
It's trauma. It's a coping mechanism, right? So we're coping with trauma.
We're young at that age. Right. We have very few skills, and we turn to things that have kind of an immediate effect to numb us out, and substances.
Escape.
Help us escape that. Yeah. You said you had symptoms of PTSD. What were some of those symptoms you were escaping?
Really high anxiety, hypervigilance, inability to sleep, feeling distrustful, flashbacks to memories, things like that.
And at 11 years old, that's a lot to put on your plate.
Right. So
all through your adolescence.
Yeah.
And just, I don't want people to think I'm being too nosy with your personal stuff here. I appreciate you sharing it. The reason I want you to share it is because I want people who might be listening to this podcast to recognize, maybe my son or somebody I know or myself, people don't always know that those sorts of things you just described are often associated with PTSD, and these are symptoms of that, and they're miserable, right? You can't sleep, you're hypervigilant, you can't settle down, you feel often like you can't concentrate, and so of course turning to something that has a pretty immediate effect like alcohol or drugs or whatever is pretty enticing when you're a young person.
Well, and in my case, it started out with a prescription of benzodiazepines. So I think I was initially prescribed Xanax and Klonopin later on.
Mm-hmm.
So, which biochemically mimics alcohol in a variety of ways, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so, so it wasn't a far jump for me to make the transition from doctor prescribed medication for a mental health condition to self-medicating with alcohol.
Did your doctor also prescribe other treatment for PTSD? Did they understand? Like, was there therapy involved?
Yeah, there were therapeutic interventions, and so at the time I did some cognitive behavioral work, but I don't think that we were quite yet at the understanding of kind of where we are now with trauma treatment in the United States. Yeah. So we've developed some really unique therapies and that are really groundbreaking, that have been, I think, amazingly effective in terms of changing people's lives who have experienced significant trauma.
Are you talking about like EMDR?
Yeah, so EMDR has been a really effective intervention for me personally.
You can't just say EMDR. We don't know what that is.
So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization. R.
Rad. It's rad.
Okay.
Yeah.
EMDR. Eye movement desensitization rocks.
Sure.
I can't remember what the R stands for.
So EMDR has been pretty effective, though, in helping people out.
Right, because it essentially it's a process through which you can reprocess memories and then restore them in a safer context, so that when you revisit those places in your mind, they don't have the emotional charge that they once did.
And along with being mindful and meditation, there is more tools in the toolbox, I guess, for recovery.
Yeah, I think maybe the overall message here is if someone has had trauma in their lives, then they really need to seek specific treatment, not just medication, and really not just supportive therapy, that they need to work with somebody who's a trauma therapist who would know what the R stands for in EMDR.
Let me ask you this, because we've had, a lot of people on the podcast who were in addiction with siblings or, kept the cycle going. Did your brother have a lot of the same symptoms you did, or was his childhood a little different than yours?
I think his childhood was a little bit different than mine, and I think that his substance use disorder expressed itself in a different
See, I think that's fascinating, where you would think that, because it's a certain family, that they would be more down this road, but it's different for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the kind of person, when I start drinking, I don't stop until something stops me. Right?
Yeah.
I need an outside force to stop me. My brother's someone who binge drinks, and so he had a harder time recognizing that as being addiction because it didn't look like me or my mom, and so in some ways, he didn't he kind of had the cards stacked against him in not knowing that was problematic for him, and so. He was eventually able to figure that out and figure out that he wanted to find some recovery for himself.
So you decided that you were ready to break the cycle.
Yeah.
And how does that look for you?
So for me, I went to an inpatient treatment facility and then engaged in an aftercare program. I still see a therapist every week, and I have a team of people that are on my side. So my recovery practice today looks like I have a therapist, I have an addiction medicine doc who handles my medications. I have a sponsor or mentor in my recovery path, and then I work in the field, and so I'm surrounded by people that love and care about me, that know me as a person in recovery, and so I have a lot of protective factors that people in my life that are in my corner that know deep inside my head what's going on.
You have a community.
I have a community, right, and that's really critically important.
Just as a side note, tell people what an addictions medical doctor is.
Yeah, so physicians can be certified in addiction medicine, just like they can be certified in general practice or anesthesiology or whatever the case may be, psychiatry. So an addiction medicine physician has specialty training in how to treat the unique needs of someone who has a substance use disorder.
And I think that's becoming more and more common. In fact, in our training program at the University of Utah for our psychiatry residents, they can choose a path where they are certified psychiatrists, but also in addictions.
Right.
And so that's very helpful for people that are coming in dealing with both addiction recovery, and mental health issues.
Yeah. I just met with a group of fellows and interns yesterday from the University of Utah.
Oh, I probably know them.
Yep. Great bunch. So, so we talked about the role of recovery community and how important that is, and finding a pathway of recovery that's got meaning and purpose for you. We mentioned 12-step, but there are other pathways of recovery that are active in Salt Lake that people can find resources around. So there's Life Ring groups that meet. Life Ring's a more secular program of recovery. There's also Recovery Dharma meetings, which is a more Buddhist-inspired path. There are fitness-based recovery groups like Fit to Recover or Addict to Athlete. So there's lots of different options for people these days, and it's not a zero sum, right? People can choose one or many.
Card.
Like what you're modeling, you have multiple resources in your corner to help you with your recovery. And so I could see how a person might enjoy a 12-step program and a fitness program.
Absolutely, yeah. Or a 12-step program and, Recovery Dharma, because it might inform their understanding of a higher power.
Yeah.
So, those, and there are also faith-based programs. So
I know the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has a 12-step program.
They do. Mm-hmm.
So how many years of sobriety do you have under your belt?
So I've been working on my recovery since 2012. So, and it hasn't been a linear process for me. So there's been setbacks. But in that time, my life has gotten progressively better.
And I don't think we've spent much time on this podcast about relapses.
We haven't. That's maybe a good topic in and of itself.
Because I a lot of times, from the people I've met, there's two theories. Once somebody relapses, they go, that's it, and then they just revert all the way back. And there's other people that go, well, no, I don't have to go all the way back to zero. I can pick up and move forward.
Exactly.
And I think that's the new kind of mentality when looking at relapses, because to be honest, relapses happen.
Exactly. Right. And we know that addiction just thrives in shame and secrecy, right? And so if someone feels that shame around a recurrence of use or an incidence of use, it's really easy to get sucked right back into the old cycle of addiction that they were in previously.
What we know in the science of behavior change in general is that real behavior change is not a linear process.
Exactly.
And that when people adopt an all or nothing mentality about behavior change, they tend to have long periods of time without progress. Mm-hmm. And so when we take that science and apply it to something specific like addiction recovery, then exactly what you're saying is there's a process. I like how you phrase that. You've been working on your recovery since 2012. And I'm assuming, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you've probably learned from your setbacks.
Right.
And that's helped inform the progress that you're experiencing today.
Yeah. And so, and so I think that, when in the past, when I have had some, an incidence of use or occurrence of use or a relapse, whatever we want to call it, it's a time when I can, take a moment and take stock of what do I need to adjust in my recovery program to better maintain my life as a person in recovery for the long haul.
Yeah. I had a fun conversation with a kid this week about famous failures. You can Google that, and pull it up. So we were in therapy and he was feeling like a failure about something. And we pulled up famous failures. You should do that. And all these stories of all these people, Michael Jordan, all these very successful folks that we think of only as successes will come up. And that's a great conversation to have, to realize that failure is only detrimental if you stop. But if you process it like you're talking about, if you stop and say, what did I learn from my setback? My process will move forward if I learn from this.
Right. Exactly.
You know, I think we say on this podcast all the time, education is important, and it's got to be education for those in recovery and for those supporting someone in recovery. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of times, you know, the people that are not in recovery or supporting someone, they think it's an all or nothing. That if they relapse,
I think we like to, as humans, simplify things. Mm-hmm. You know, we like to break things down to simple terms, and so it's easy for any of us to get caught up in black and white, all or nothing thinking. Especially about things we don't understand. So education is really key to helping us understand that probably the success you're having today, Evan, has a lot to do with learning from those setbacks over the last 7 years.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of resiliency.
Yes.
And so, just keeping at it despite those setbacks.
You know, a lot of times people ask me, like, if you could go back, could you change it? And I think the simple answer is yes, I would love to go back and change it, but I can't.
Right.
But I also don't know if I would be right here if I did change it, if I would have the knowledge, the empathy, the understanding, if I didn't go through
knowledge, you know, understanding, empathy, resilience. Those are hard-earned traits.
Right.
You know, you cannot become a resilient person without going through difficulties and learning from them. And so if you want to be that kind of person, you have to take whatever difficult situations you're having in life right now and learn from them. That's
because they're all going to come. I mean,
you never become that kind of person, that resilient, forward-moving person without doing hard things in life.